think for me, I had to kind of figure out what's the grounding for my faith. Is it because, am I a Christian because evolution is false? Or am I a Christian because I've really encountered and found the evidence that Jesus really rose from the dead? I think when I realized that about the genome, I think there's this point where it kind of struck me that, wow, even if evolution is false, God certainly isn't as concerned about disproving it as I am.
That's a difficult realization.
And I think his priorities are very different. And I think when you think about it, it's a very strange sort of set of priorities for God to have had. And so when he was creating, I mean, he could have, right? He could have just made it very clear that way. But the reality is he didn't. And, you know, and I started reading scripture, and I remember one of these passages that really used to hang over my, kind of be like the, almost like your conscience in the back of your head as I went through kind of my anti-evolutionist days, where it says that Jesus, facing a skeptical generation, says that, he's going to offer a skeptical generation just one sign. It's a sign of Jonah, which means that he's going to go into the earth and he's going to die and rise again. And I'm not saying that that's the only miracle that's out there, but what Jesus is saying is that, if you come skeptical asking for a sign, he'll give you a sign. He's going to give you one sign. and if you can't actually deal with that one, it's going to be very hard to see anything else. And I remember thinking about that and just thinking about how I was really trying to use disproving evolution as a sign. Mm-hmm.
It's a crutch to some people to have to have scientific evidence to support their God. And this is something that's come up in my discussions with other religious scientists, is that, faith is meaningless if there's evidence.
Well, I don't know about that. Look, I mean, what do you mean by faith, right?
If there's evidence of God, you don't need faith, right? If there's scientific evidence that you can prove God exists, then there's no need for faith. Right?
I don't know if that's how I understand it. I think that faith is, best understood as trust. I mean, that's probably the closest analog I can come up with. And it's not only trust, but I think it's very close to that. I think even if there's evidence, you have to decide if you're going to trust that evidence or not. You trust the evidence for common descent. You probably haven't even seen the majority of it.
I'm looking for it right now.
Yeah, and I think that's what faith is. It's kind of, deciding what you're going to put your trust in that sense. And I don't think evidence works in conflict with faith that way. Give me a break. Just look at society. There's an immense amount of evidence that the vaccines are safe and effective. But people don't have faith in them. They don't trust them. Many people don't. You know what I mean, right?
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't have the capability to assess the evidence, which is the problem. And then they end up trusting their leaders, and not all of their leaders are leading them in the right direction.
It's misplaced trust and misplaced distrust, but evidence doesn't somehow remove the need for trust. I mean, scientists in that type of faith I'm talking about, we have a lot of faith. We trust our colleagues to be giving trustworthy reports of the evidence. And we usually trust experts in science when they're talking about their field of expertise, because we usually trust them. I'm saying usually because we also have safeguards against blind trust, right?
Yes, and science is supposed to be a self-correcting enterprise, and it may not self-correct immediately, but over time, when enough people can't reproduce a result, then science will turn and backtrack towards a closer correspondence to observations, shall we say?
We should hope so, and hopefully that does happen. And sometimes it can go a little wild, but I kind of come to find science in general to be a very trustworthy community. I haven't looked directly at all of the underlying data in the trials for the vaccines, for example, right?
Sure.
But I trust that on some basic level, it's not massive fraud, right? I think that where errors are made, it's kind of made on a different level than that in most cases. And there's also safeguards in terms of real consequences for people if they lie about stuff. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I do think that science is trustworthy in that sense. But I think for me, I had to kind of figure out what's the grounding for my faith. Is it because, am I a Christian because evolution is false? Or am I a Christian because I've really encountered and found the evidence that Jesus really rose from the dead? And I do think that there's evidence for that, too. Now, we don't have to debate that or argue it or go over it. I mean, that's not the point. But it's not about fideism. I'm not saying that you just have to have faith without evidence or evidence-free faith. I'm just saying that if we're skeptical, Jesus does offer us evidence. It's just not evidence against evolution. It's evidence that he rose from the dead.
Right.